Hey guys, today we're going to do several things. A lot of talking, which is sort of boring, but it's gotta be done. The first thing I want to talk to you about is one thing I don't like about YouTube. Second, I'm going to ask you some questions. Third, I'm going to answer the questions that you pose to me. And finally, I'm going to try to give away a really cool camera strap. So let's get started. Let's get right into it. Let's get down to the nitty gritty and let's talk about YouTube. I like YouTube for lots of reasons, not least of which is that hundreds of thousands of people get to enjoy looking at my beautiful face, which is super important for my ego and just feeling okay about myself. Not really. But what I don't like about YouTube is the parallel discussions that happen afterwards. There are some really, really smart people out there, and I learned so much from you. But what's a bummer to me is that you have so many parallel discussions happening. Some of them are carbon copies of others. I just end up repeating myself a whole lot. What would be better is if we had a little bit more of a group discussion going where some of the people commenting could also benefit from what other people are saying in grouped sort of thematic conversations. It doesn't lend itself to cohesive conversations and kind of building a community who get to know one another. It really just creates relationships between me and you in these isolated sort of pairs, but not as a cohesive whole unless you drive to another platform. And I really hate that about YouTube. I wish that there was a better way to bring us all kind of together, but there's not. So in order to try something a bit different, I would like to give a little bit more of a platform for you guys to hear each other. What I think would be pretty cool to try is for me to ask you some questions and have you respond, and then I'll create a video where I respond or kind of showcase some of those interesting responses. Because again, I think a lot of you are just really smart, intelligent, maybe even better looking. I'm not sure about that one, but it's possible. It is in the realm of possibility. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you 3 questions. I would love to hear your responses to 1, 2, or all 3 of these questions in the comments below. And as extra incentive for you to comment, I am going to award one random commentator in the comments with a camera strap. We've got our friends over at Hyperion Camera Straps in Greece who have agreed to send a camera strap to a lucky winner. These straps are great, they're excellent quality, they're custom, handmade, and you can pick your colors and length, and you can get the wrist straps or the around the neck straps, and they're just great. We do not benefit by telling you that at all, other than that they're going to give away one to one of you at random. We just like them, so thank you, Hyperion. You can find a link to them below. Okay, so without further ado, let's get to the questions for you. That rhymed, and I didn't even mean it to. Question 1. I have to read it. And this one is gonna get a bit personal. You're gonna have to dig deep for the answer to this one, but it's, what is the most meaningful thing that has happened to you or to someone else as a result of your photography? Question number 2, what is the biggest challenge or the #1 obstacle that is stopping you from producing the sort of photography you want to be producing? And finally, a Q&A session wouldn't be complete without some discussion of gear, because that's what most people who comment on my YouTube videos have to talk about, and that's gear, which is totally fine. But my 3rd question for you is gear related, and it comes in 2 parts. The first is, what is the one photography related purchase that you regret the most? And the second part to that question is, which purchase do you feel like was your best investment? All right, so I really look forward to seeing your responses, and I'll do a follow-up video where I highlight some of those. Now we're gonna get into the questions that you asked me. We'll separate these out into just some miscellaneous ones first, then we'll get into gear-specific questions, and finally we'll end it with some workflow post-processing type questions. The first question comes from Matteo E, who asks, what's up with your hands? Well, Matteo, that is a great question, one that I hesitate to answer because it's a little personal, but you know, whatever, you asked. So I have a rare, weird, frustrating, and very inconvenient skin disease that affects only my hands and my feet, especially when they are exposed to cold weather which, as you can imagine, is not great for a photographer. Those are pretty important appendages to have. So if you see me wearing these lovely designer fingerless gloves, it's because I'm having a flare-up and it's covering some gross stuff happening in this region. It comes and goes, it's cyclical, so sometimes I wear them, sometimes I don't. It's not a fashion statement, though I will say this: if a large number of people decided to start wearing these, it would help me feel less weird going out in public. So you can find a link to these in the description. I'd encourage everybody to start wearing them. Let's make this a thing. Chris G asks, can you accentuate my bank balance so I can buy a new lens? Yes, Chris, we would love to. If you could just send us your bank account information, including social security number, mother's maiden name, really anything that will allow us full access to your account, that'd be great. Next, Dejibid76, Dejibjilab, you should consider using some vowels in your screen name. They ask, if cameras did not exist, what would you have done for creativity and work? Good question, but I do want to make clear we don't do photography for work full-time. We don't make a full-time living off of photography. I think that's important to note because I have a really, really great job that's in the design field. So it's related, it's creative, but I don't try to make my living with photography. I do photography at my own leisure when it pleases me in a way that I like. And we do make some money from our portrait photography side business that we do evenings and weekends, again, at our own leisure. And that just helps pay for the gear, really. I wouldn't call it a substantial money-making factor that supports our livelihood. I think if we had to rely on photography for our full-time livelihood, we would die. So I just wanted to make that clear first off, but to answer your question, I think if I didn't have photography for a creative outlet, that answer's pretty easy. I would turn to design and music. I mean, I already do design stuff, and I already am a musician also. You will have heard some of my music in these YouTube videos, even if you weren't made aware of it. But music, it's great, it's fun. I'll do more of it, I think, in episodes to come. Next question we have is from Brian Robertson, who asks, have you also thought about doing photo assignments? You know, Brian, that's a great question. Yes, I've thought about that sort of thing, but the problem is our channel really isn't focused on like basic education side of photography. It's a little bit more focused on the journey of being a photographer and a little bit more entertainment focused, but also focused on the gear of photography and talking a lot about the gear and geeking out on it. It's just stuff that I like watching, just more of that. It's not really, I guess there's a strategy that went into it, anything other than just creating more content that we like to watch. So I think if I started doing more educational centric, it would change the dynamic and the feel of the channel, and I'm not sure that I want to do that. Plus, there's just so much education stuff about photography on the YouTubes. I mean, I don't think they need Andrew and Denae to add anything else to that already pretty saturated market. So probably not. So next, let's talk about some gear questions. We have a question from Sagaga, who asks, what lens would you use? Great question. I will answer that question only after you answer this question that I have for you, Sagaga, and that is, what food do you eat? Next, we have a question from City Street, our good friend and great photographer. I don't remember your first name though. I looked it up once, but he asks, if you could take only one camera and one lens and climb into a time machine and travel back in time, what would it be and what period of time would you love to shoot? That is such a fun question. Thank you for asking. I would choose like the late 20s, early 30s, the Great Depression in the US time frame, prior to the US entering World War II. This era, well, for several reasons. One is, you didn't specify if I could get back into the time machine and come back to our time or not. But if I was stuck back there, I would probably not want to take a digital camera because I would be seen as a magician for one, and also no way to process it, and also no way to charge it, that sort of thing. So I would take back probably a Leica M6 with probably the Summilux 50mm. That would be fun because 35mm film was around. By then, that's when it was kind of getting started. I think the sprockets were different though, so I don't know how I'd handle that. But anyway, that's what I would take. That's where I would go. And the reason is because I really love that era of time that has this magic kind of despair yet hopeful pre-prosperity time frame where you still had kind of the throes of industrial revolution still kind of haunting the world. You still had some child labor happening, and you had like photographers like Louis Hine, who was documenting some of that and doing some great work that really helped shape the culture and the future generations of industrialism, the way that the nation works, things like that. It's just, it's not an optimistic time for sure, but there's a beauty there that I find captivating. So that's an easy one for me. Kind of geeked out on your question there. Let's go to the next one. Stephen Polhill asks, what camera calibration profile do you use, please? They make such a difference. They do make a difference, but I don't really use camera profiles because I don't shoot in JPEG. I post-process RAW only. But I mean, I will use the profiles in Lightroom. A lot of times I'll choose Classic Chrome, now Eternal, Pro Negative Standard. Those are the three I really like because I shoot Fuji, so I'll use those as kind of profiles as a point of departure, and then I'll go from there. Next question, Brian Campbell asks, what are your thoughts on Eterna for still photography, and how do you process them? Do you process through Iridiant Developer first? Great question, Brian. I love Eterna, I like it for video. For photos though, you can check out my San Francisco video that I just put out. In that video, I would say probably 1/3 to half of the photos were used with the Eterna profile in post-processing as a point of departure. Some of that was just me playing with it and seeing how I liked it. So yeah, I would say I definitely use it, and I would use it with photos as a point of departure again. And then, do I process in Lightroom? Yes. On intake, I reduce the sharpness. I don't bring any I don't rely on any sharpening in Lightroom because of how it plays with it in not a pleasant way. When I sharpen, it's usually because I'm printing, and I'll only sharpen then, and I'll do it on the JPEGs later in Photoshop, so it's not having that same sort of weird effect. Some people have said that that's gotten better with newer versions of Lightroom. I haven't seen it personally. I think it still causes some weirdness to happen. I know Iridiant does a better job with that, but I do not, for whatever reason, I don't feel like I can get the type of photos that I'm happy with the color out of Iridiant that I can with Lightroom, and I hate the UI. A lot of people will process in Iridiant first and then develop further in Lightroom. I haven't found a workflow that I enjoy with that. So nope, I don't do it. I don't do any Iridiant. I'm not necessarily not recommending it. I think it's fine. It's just not for me. And yeah. Next question is from Jeffrey Bars, who asks, have you ever edited Denae's photos while she edits yours, or worked separately on the same image in Lightroom? No, the answer is no. We don't do anything like that, and the reason is because Denae is severely allergic to computers, and specifically anything that involves more than one dial or slider. So our workflow usually looks more like we take the photos that we take together, she'll go through it first pass to cull them, to get rid of the bad ones, to mark the ones she likes best, and then I take it from there. I will do all of the post-processing finishing touches on those photos. A lot of times I'll bring her in, more of a creative director type thing. As long as she's not touching that computer, she's okay. It's better for everyone if that's the way it's done. Maybe someday she'll get into it more, but for now. Frank Romero asks, he asked about SoundCloud. Yes, we use SoundCloud most of the time to find music to play on our channel. That's for several reasons. One is, most important is I love the music that I find on SoundCloud. A lot of the new chill hop type style of music being produced by younger musicians and artists on there. I just love it. I really like it. It fits with the mood that I'm trying to convey in the videos that I create. When I do that though, I'll make sure to support that musician. I'll buy them the songs, or if they don't have that, they have a donation, I'll donate. Try to make sure that I am trying to fairly compensate for them, and I'll definitely get permission. But you'll find that a lot of those artists are fine with you just using it if you credit them, because they're trying to get their name out there. But there's another thing that comes along with that, and that we get a lot of flack. There's a lot of people who don't like that music, who don't get it, who become personally offended for whatever reason when I put that kind of music in my videos. I think it's kind of interesting to see that people kind of have this attitude like we should be catering to their musical tastes and not be offending them through, I don't know, an expression of our own personality. It seems odd to me that would upset people, but for whatever reason, it does. So yeah, I mean, we could pick a little bit more run-of-the-mill music you can get from stock music sites. There's some phenomenal ones out there for sure. You're gonna find those on a lot of the bigger YouTuber pages. They'll, pay for that unlimited use license for the year, and then they'll find some great, really good, high quality stock music. But to me, it just feels a little more corporate. It's not as original. It's not as interesting. I really like finding more obscure music on SoundCloud and supporting those folks, and just feels more unique to me. So that's what we do. For those that find that upsetting or don't like it, I mean, sorry, but not really sorry. Finally, we have Alween Tyne, I think. What would you recommend? XT2 versus XH1, only a $300 difference, or should I wait for the XT3? I mean, I know you're thinking that's a simple question, but it's not a simple answer. My first response to these sorts of questions is, which one appeals to you the most? If you're excited about gear, you'll be excited to have it with you. You'll be more excited to take photos. You're more likely to have more photos come as a result. So get the gear that makes you excited. I know that's not a popular answer right now. It seems like on YouTube there's this trend for people to fight the GAS, the gear acquisition syndrome thing, and make a big stink about people who like to talk about new gear. They'll continually remind us, obsessively so, that it's not about the gear, it's about your skills as a photographer. No one's arguing that. I don't think I've ever heard anyone say that gear will make you a better photographer. So anyway, if you're excited about the gear, that's not a bad thing. But maybe that's a cop-out answer. To get a little bit more into the specifics, I choose the XT2 over the XH1 for photography because it's what I enjoy. I prefer the smaller form factor. I prefer having an exposure compensation dial over an LED panel or whatever that is, that little indicator the XH1 has. XH1 feels like a DSLR, and I've never enjoyed shooting with a DSLR. So that's just me. That's what I enjoy. And I don't think you have to have a logical answer for that. Photography is an emotional experience, and it's an emotional medium, and I think that it's okay and it makes sense that our tools appeal to our emotions. But that's an easy answer from someone like me who doesn't make a living off photography. If you're trying to do that, it's a different answer, obviously. And I think you're probably coming from the position of maybe a hobbyist, and so I still think that's a good answer. But if you're not, if you're gonna try to make money, I mean, obviously the XH1 is a better camera in general than the XT2. I would even go further and say, if you're a professional and you need to edge out competition, that your livelihood depends on your ability to capture the best possible photography, then you're going to be wanting to look at the higher end cameras that have greater upper limits. We're talking about the Nikon D850 or like the Sony A9, even much more expensive cameras, but getting into those systems where, even if you can't afford those yet, where you start out smaller, maybe you get the A7 III, which is much more affordable and comparable to the XH1, knowing that you'll work your way up to an A9 if you're wanting to get into sports or you want to earn money from your photography eventually. That might be a better option. But again, if you're a hobbyist, get the gear that gets you excited. That's my answer. Should you wait for the XT3? No, no, I never wait. I don't think anyone should wait. I think you time's a wasting. Your life is passing by. You're missing opportunities to capture photos. Get the best possible gear you can afford, the best possible lenses you can afford at any given time. I never regret the the gear that I've purchased that have helped me to get the photography that I have, because when I'm old, I mean, that's all I'll have to look back on are those photos and those treasured memories. So no, don't wait. I don't know why anyone waits for the new thing. I mean, if it's an iPhone, yeah, maybe, but we're talking about memories. We're talking about life that's going by at 100 miles an hour. You got to capture that crap. But that's what I would do, and that's my best advice, and that's all the time we have for questions right now. So I really look forward to the responses that you have in the comments. I look forward to responding to those, and I'll talk to you again real soon.